Chosen one. While you are going about your day, someone is speaking your name in rooms you have never entered. They are not just mentioning you casually, they are glorifying your abilities to everyone who will listen. This isn't polite acknowledgement or surface-level praise. This is raw, unfiltered testimony about what you have become. Before I reveal who this person is, you need to understand exactly what they are witnessing in you, because what they see isn't luck. It isn't talent that fell from the sky. It is transformation that cost you everything. They watched you rebuild yourself when no one was looking. Not the kind of self-improvement that gets posted online with perfect lighting and motivational captions. The invisible work. The 3 a.m. decisions when your mind was screaming at you to quit. The mornings you showed up even when every cell in your body wanted to stay hidden. The moments when quitting would have been easier than breathing, and you chose to stay anyway. You kept investing in your growth when growth had nothing visible to offer you yet. No applause, no recognition, no external confirmation that any of it mattered. You were working in the dark, trusting a process that hadn't proven itself yet. You were betting on yourself when the odds looked terrible on paper. That level of self-trust. Most people never develop it. They wait for permission. They wait for proof. They wait for someone else to believe first. You didn't wait. They watched you navigate change without breaking. Every time life dismantled your plan, you didn't freeze or collapse. You absorbed the impact, found a new angle, and emerged with capabilities you didn't have before. Most people experience disruption as something that diminishes them, something that takes away options and leaves them smaller. You learn to move through it as something that reveals you and makes you larger. Every pivot made you sharper. Every disruption expanded your capacity. You developed a relationship with uncertainty that most people never achieve. You learned to operate effectively in the gap between what you planned and what actually happened. You built emotional regulation from scratch in an environment that never taught it. You had to figure out how to manage your internal world without a model, without a guide, in a context that didn't reward self-control and didn't value emotional intelligence. You taught yourself to respond instead of react, to feel without being governed by feeling, to hold space for difficult emotions without letting them drive your decisions. You transformed your relationship with money from fear-based to values-based. You stopped letting scarcity thinking dictate your choices. You learned to invest in yourself even when the return wasn't guaranteed. You built financial discipline not from deprivation but from clarity about what actually matters. You rewired your mind, confronting patterns and programming that most people carry to their graves. The beliefs about what you deserve, the stories about what is possible for someone like you, the inherited limitations that weren't even yours to begin with. You released what didn't. Here is what stopped this person in their tracks. You didn't work on one area, you worked on all of them simultaneously. Without a map, without guaranteed results, without anyone confirming it was worth the effort. Your abilities aren't a raw sum list. They are evidence of conversion. Each one represents something you took from broken to functional, from wounded to load-bearing, through sustained, unglamorous, deliberate effort. The person praising you understands the full weight of that conversion cost. That is why the praise doesn't stay contained. It spills out constantly because what they are describing is too significant for silence, and there is something particular about how they describe you. They are not recounting achievements. They are describing the quality of how you operate. The way you walk into chaos and immediately see what everyone else missed. The way you hold composure while the room is still processing the problem. The way your judgment lands with a precision that surprises people who haven't been paying attention. That quality didn't appear because conditions were favorable. It was forged specifically because they weren't. Every environment that underestimated you sharpened your ability to see through noise. Every relationship that withheld belief built the muscle of self-direction that now makes you dependable in ways others can feel before they have words for it. You became the person who doesn't announce their capabilities. because the capabilities announce themselves. If this resonates, comment chosen below and subscribe so you don't miss what is coming next. This gets deeper. Now about your foundation. This isn't victim storytelling. This is context that matters when measuring what is truly remarkable. You started on uneven ground. Maybe the home was fractured. Maybe love came with conditions attached. Maybe there was a voice, loud and dominant, telling you directly or through daily accumulation that you weren't quite enough, not quite capable, not quite deserving of the investment that seemed to flow naturally toward others. Maybe the unspoken rule was, stay inside what has been defined for you, or find your own way out. You absorbed that environment. It shaped you in ways you didn't choose. And then this is where your story changes. You decided that what shaped you wouldn't be the final word on who you were. That decision didn't arrive with ceremony, no dramatic turning point. It was quieter and harder, a long series of small, private choices, each one pulling you further from the gravitational pull of where you came from and closer to who you actually were. Building on a broken foundation doesn't make you a sad story. It makes you an architectural miracle. The person praising your abilities knows your foundation. They know exactly what you were working from when you started. That is why they don't just say, look what this person accomplished. They say, look what this person accomplished and understand where they started. That context transforms admiration into testimony. This person isn't a stranger. They held a significant position in your story, someone who, by every rule of how these relationships work, should have been your first believer. Your loudest champion from the beginning, the person who looked at you without conditions and said, I see what you are capable of, and I am in your corner fully. That person didn't do that. Understanding why matters. Not for their sake, for yours. You deserve to understand the mechanism clearly, so you never again confuse someone else's limitation with a judgment about your worth. This person carried pride, the heavy, calcified kind that builds up over years of unexpressed disappointment in their own life. The distance between what they imagined for themselves and what materialized. The gap between the potential they once felt and the reality they settled into. That pride created a wall between them and the ability to celebrate your trajectory while they were still processing their own. When you were building, when you needed belief most, their pride translated into silence or worse, subtle discouragement dressed as realism. The carefully worded warnings, the raised eyebrows when you shared your plans. The questions designed to highlight obstacles instead of possibilities. Not because you weren't capable, because watching you reach for more confronted them with questions about their own choices they weren't ready to face. Your growth held up a mirror they didn't want to look into. Every step you took forward was an implicit question about the steps they chose not to take. Every risk you embraced highlighted the risks they avoided. Every boundary you set illuminated the boundaries they never established. Your evolution was a referendum on their stagnation, and they couldn't handle it, so they withheld what you needed, not maliciously necessarily. Defensively, they convinced themselves you were reaching too far, moving too fast. Building on unstable ground, they rationalized their silence as protection, as wisdom, as experience teaching the next generation to be realistic. What they were actually protecting was their own ego from the discomfort of watching you outgrow the life they settled into. They told themselves stories to justify the lack of support. You were too young, too inexperienced, too ambitious, too different from how things are supposed to be done. These weren't observations, these were defenses, psychological armor protecting them from having to acknowledge that your courage was highlighting their caution. Your growth was exposing their stagnation. Your vision was revealing their resignation. Here is what changed. You kept building anyway. You didn't stop and wait for their permission. You didn't shrink to make them comfortable. You built so undeniably, so consistently, so thoroughly that eventually the evidence became impossible to ignore. The life you constructed became too real, too visible, too documented to dismiss. And when enough other people started noticing what you built, When external validation began arriving from sources they respected, something shifted in them. Their pride, which had blocked recognition, now needed to reposition itself, because staying silent while everyone else praised you would expose exactly what they had been doing. It would make their prior dismissal look like the limitation it always was. So they flipped, not gradually, decisively. They went from withholding belief to broadcasting it loudly, publicly, to everyone. And here is the part that matters most. This flip isn't about you finally becoming worthy of their approval. You were always worthy. This flip is about them finally catching up to what was always true. Their late arrival to your story doesn't diminish your story. It just reveals the timeline of their own growth. Now they are in rooms telling people about you, describing your abilities, explaining your journey, speaking your name with conviction to audiences who haven't met you yet. And while that might feel validating, stay clear on what it actually represents. It is not the arrival of your worth. It is their arrival to awareness of your worth. Those are not the same thing. Your worth was being built in real time while they were silent. The foundation, the structure, the entire architecture of who you have become was constructed during the years they weren't watching, or were watching but not believing. What is happening now is harvest season. Everything you invested in yourself has been compounding quietly. The internal growth, the healed patterns, the sharpened instincts, the deepened expertise, all of it accumulating below the surface, the way roots accumulate before a tree becomes undeniable. The late nights studying when everyone else was sleeping, the conversations you had with yourself, working through limiting beliefs until they lost their grip, the money you invested in learning when you could have spent it on comfort, the relationships you ended because you finally understood your worth, the opportunities you turned down because they didn't align with where you were heading, the discipline you built when motivation ran out, the consistency you maintained when no one was watching. All of that, every single decision, every sacrifice, every moment of choosing growth over comfort. It has all been accumulating interest, building momentum, creating a foundation so solid that what is about to be built on top of it will astound everyone who has been watching from a distance. People who only watch the surface will assume it happened quickly. They will see the opportunities arriving now and think it is sudden. They will witness the doors opening and call it luck. They will observe the recognition and attribute it to timing. It didn't happen quickly. It happened over every season of invisible effort. It is only becoming visible now because the roots have finally grown deep enough, strong enough, widespread enough to support what is breaking through to the surface. Your expertise isn't a ceiling you are approaching. It is a launching point you are standing on. The recognition reaching you isn't the arrival. It is the first confirmation that the fruit is coming in, and there is significantly more behind it. What you are seeing now is just the first wave of return on years of investment. The compound interest is just starting to kick in. When someone with genuine proximity to your story praises you to rooms full of people who haven't encountered you yet, that is not just emotional tribute, that is reputation being built in real time. In spaces you haven't entered, the people hearing your name aren't receiving information neutrally. They are receiving it through the filter of this person's conviction, and conviction is contagious. It primes everyone who hears it to look for confirmation when they finally meet you. Practically, this means you are being introduced before you say a word by the quality of someone else's testimony. The doors opening aren't opening because of luck or timing alone. They are opening because someone who witnessed your full story decided to make sure others knew what they saw. So how do you move through what is coming? Not tentatively, not with energy split between moving forward and checking if old doubts are gaining ground. Not with the low-level apology that creeps into people who were told too many times they were reaching for too much. Not with the subtle self-sabotage that shows up when people finally get what they have been working for, but don't feel worthy of receiving it. You walk into it like you built it because you did with your own hands, your own mind. Every inch of ground you are standing on was earned, but through the repeated, unglamorous, non-negotiable decision to keep going, keep growing, keep showing up fully for your own life even when applause hadn't arrived and results were still invisible. That decision, repeated across thousands of moments when no one was watching, is your credential. Not a title someone gave you, not the endorsement of someone who withheld it too long, not the validation you finally received after proving yourself beyond any reasonable doubt. The body of work you assembled in private, across every version of yourself, is your authority. The scar tissue from every battle you fought in the dark is your asam. The person you became while no one believed is your qualification. You don't shrink in this season. You don't downplay what you have built to make others comfortable with your level. You don't dim your light so people who stayed in the dark don't feel bad about their choices. You don't perform modesty to avoid the discomfort of being fully seen. You don't apologize for occupying space you earned. Being fully seen isn't a risk anymore. It is the entire point. Everything you built was always in service of arriving here. A life that reflects back to you, in full visibility, who you actually are and what you are actually capable of. You didn't do all that work to hide when it finally pays off. Take up your space. Speak with the authority of someone who earned it through fire. Make the move, the ask, the decision, the investment. Whatever the next right step is, let the version of you that did all that invisible work finally operate without a ceiling. Stop negotiating with yourself about what you deserve. Stop second-guessing whether you are ready. You have been ready. The work made you ready before the opportunity arrived. When this person brings their praise to you directly, when they finally say to your face what they have been saying to everyone else, you will not collapse into it or deflect it. You will receive it cleanly with full presence as confirmation of something you have quietly known for a while. You will let it be true because it is true. It was true before anyone said it out loud. Stay with me until the end, because what I am about to tell you will shift everything about how you see this next chapter. The people confused by how much you have grown, the ones who knew the earlier version and are still updating their picture of you, aren't your problem to manage. You don't slow down to give them time to catch up. You don't make yourself smaller to ease their adjustment. The people genuinely for you aren't confused by your growth. They are celebrating it. Let that celebration be louder in your life than the momentary disorientation of anyone still calibrating. Your job isn't to manage how people respond to your elevation. Your job is to keep elevating. The gap is closing now. You are moving naturally, inevitably, not from hunger, but from momentum, toward everything that belongs to you. That room, that conversation, that moment where the testimony and the life and the person all arrive in the same place at the same time is one of many things moving toward you as this season opens. Look at the full arc. You started on ground that wasn't solid, in an environment that didn't give you everything you needed, shaped by a relationship where support, that should have arrived early instead, arrived late, loud, public, and directed at everyone but you, in a context where the people closest to you couldn't see you clearly because their own unresolved issues clouded their vision. You built anyway, not from victimhood, but from vision, from the stubborn, clear, unshakable decision that the beginning of your story wouldn't be its definition, that your origin wouldn't determine your destination, that the hand you were dealt wouldn't limit what you could build. You built in every direction simultaneously. The internal and external work, the emotional and financial, the mindset and the craft, the relationships and the skills, the character and the competence. You didn't just improve in one area while neglecting the others. You understood, consciously or unconsciously, that real transformation requires wholeness, that you cannot build an extraordinary life on a fractured foundation. So you did the foundational work even when it was invisible. Especially when it was invisible. You built a life that is, in its wholeness, depth, and demonstrated resilience, genuinely extraordinary. Not extraordinary compared to some fantasy standard. Extraordinary measured against where you started, what you had to work with, and how many times you had every reason to quit but didn't. The person in those rooms isn't exaggerating when they describe you. They are not being generous with the truth or inflating your accomplishments to make themselves look good for knowing you. They are reporting what they saw as accurately as they know how, and they are doing it because staying silent about transformation this real would be dishonest. You did this, you built this, every piece of it, and the life you built is now traveling ahead of you into every space you are about to enter, introducing you before you arrive, creating curiosity, opening doors, generating opportunities that wouldn't exist if someone wasn't in those rooms making sure your name is spoken with conviction. Here is the final thing. The image this message opened with, someone praising your name in rooms you cannot see, isn't the destination. It is a signal. It is the world confirming, through the voice of someone who witnessed the real version of your journey, what has been true about you all along. That the raw material your life handed you was always going to be converted into something worth praising. That the obstacles in your path were never going to stop you. That the lack of support in the beginning was never going to prevent support from arriving later. That the pain you experienced was never going to define you. It was only going to refine you. You were always going to get here. The unsteady foundation didn't stop it. The rationed love didn't stop it. The dominant voice that said you weren't enough didn't stop it. The absence of a cheering section didn't stop it. The long stretches of invisible effort in the dark didn't stop it. The doubt, the fear, the uncertainty, the moments when you couldn't see the path forward, none of it stopped it, because none of it could. The engine driving everything was never external. It never depended on someone else believing in you first. It never required perfect circumstances or ideal timing or unlimited resources. It came from inside you, from a place deeper than logic, stronger than fear, more persistent than doubt. It was always inside you, and everyone who tried to dim it, including the parts of yourself that questioned whether you had what it takes, failed. The person speaking your name in those rooms isn't creating your worth with their words. They are catching up to a truth your life has been demonstrating for a long time. They are finally seeing what was always there. They are finally saying what should have been said years ago. Better late than never, but understand clearly. You didn't need them to say it for it to be true. You already know what you are. You already know what you are capable of. You already know the season is real, the harvest is yours, and the path ahead is wider than anything you have walked before. You know it because you built it. You know it because you lived through every moment that forged it. You know it because the evidence is written in every scar, every lesson, every transformation you carried out when no one was watching. Walk into it. Not like someone who got lucky, not like someone who stumbled into blessing, not like someone who is surprised by their own success, like someone who built this with intention, with sacrifice, with relentless commitment to becoming more than circumstances suggested was possible, because that is exactly what you did. The admiration moving through those rooms right now, the testimony, the glorifying, the praise being spoken about you to everyone who will listen. It is not the ceiling of what is coming. It is the floor for the chosen ones who built in dark. The light wasn't coming. It arrived the moment you decided you were worth building for. Everything since has been the harvest catching up to you. If you made it to the end, you are exactly who this message was meant for. Drop ready in the comments and subscribe, because the next level is already in motion. Your only job now is to walk into it fully.